Good afternoon and welcome to the re-emergence of the Disability Filibuster. My name is Catherine Frazee. I am one of your two grievous and irremediable hosts this afternoon. And my first honor is to introduce and welcome Stephen Lytton from the Lytton First Nation to open this space and share with us some of his wisdom. Stephen, so you know, is the chair of the board of the British Columbia Aboriginal Network on Disability Society. He is a residential school survivor, as well as being an accomplished writer, actor, and public speaker. Stephen, you have our respect and our attention. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. I'm very honored to be a part of this filibuster today and continue going forward as we address the issues of concern today. My name is Stephen Lytton and I am a member of the Nikumin Indian Band within the Untitled First Nations. I'm also the board president of British Columbia Aboriginal Network on Disability Society. I am a residential school survivor. I am an advocate, I am an actor, and I am a First Nations man who has a disability. Before I continue, I would like to recognize the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations, on whose territories I am proud to live, work, and play. I would also like to recognize and thank the peoples and their territories that each of you are calling in from today. Recognizing Indigenous territories is something that we see often in today's meetings, ceremonies, and gatherings. It's important to remember that the territorial acknowledgements are not just a box to be checked or to be politically correct. Acknowledging territories shows our gratitude to those who reside there and to honor and respect the Indigenous peoples who have lived and protected these lands since time immemorial. They are used to help to forge relationships and to move forward the healing and righting the wrongs and injustices of colonization and its devastating impact on the Indigenous peoples and our relationships with our lands. So I ask you that you remember, when you acknowledge a territory, you are also recognizing the past and you are committing to the work for a better future for all of us. I am very pleased to be able to be here with you and open this second disability filibuster. However, not so pleased as to why it is necessary that we are here. I spent 16 years in residential school because the government of the day deemed I was deficient as a person. Strengthened by the silence and too often the approval of the majority of non-Indigenous population and institutions of Canada, the government was empowered to decide what was best for me, to decide how I needed to change. and how they would make me more acceptable as a person. I was never asked, none of us were. And those who cried for help, for justice, and for respect were ignored. We were in the government's eyes something they could never imagine being or ever wanting to be. We are Indigenous. Today, Bill C-7, medical assistance in dying, brings the perspective and that attitude to the forefront once again, but this time for persons with disabilities. Through the implementation of Bill C-7, the government has portrayed persons with disabilities as barriers, living non-contributing lives of the unimaginable, suffering physically, mentally, and spiritually. No rational person would want to be us. No one would want to be like us. We are a drain on society. We are to be pitied, patronized, and spoken for. We don't know what we need. How could we? We are, after all disabled. We are told death is a release. It's a gift. We should be thankful, not angry. Thankful for a state-assisted death. Thankful for the support to die. We need to forget about the lack of state support necessary to help us live the lives we are entitled to. We need to be grateful. We need to be quiet. But you and I know the truth. We know that it is the systems and the environments that disable us. It's the attitudes towards disability. It's being forced to live in poverty. It's the lack of relevant and adequate programs, services, housing, and the list continues. Offering people with disabilities death before ensuring they have all the supports necessary for a good life is not progressive. It's not forward thinking. It is ableism. It is the state-sponsored eugenics. But I have hope. I have hope because of people like you, people with disabilities, and our allies. When governments and the public turn away, you turn up. When they try to take our voice, you take it back. It's always been that way, and it will always be. We are all valuable, each and every one of us. And we are also important. Your passion, work, and your commitment to what we all know to be right defines you, contrary to what some might say and think. Disabled people are not to be pitied, and we will not go gently into the good night. We are a force to be reckoned with. And for those who think elsewise, they should be prepared for their disappointment. Before considering MAiD, if at all, we must explore all avenues, pain relief options, improve extended care and facilities, help for the caregivers to lessen the burden. Thank you all my relations.
So much, Stephen, for being with us. What a beautiful way to begin this gathering. And thank you so much for sharing with us some of the things that are bringing you hope, because the conversations that we're having are bleak and dark, but we need to make sure that we cling to hope in these times too. So we're going to talk more about that as the conversation goes on, but thank you so much for starting us off with that and anchoring us in that hope. I'm so grateful. I'm going to pass it to my dear newest friend, Catherine, and they are going to give us a short overview of the Disability Filibuster, where we're at right now, and how we got here. Also, before I pass to Catherine, I just want to take a second to thank our ASL interpreters who are here. For those of us who are in the Zoom, you can see Shelby. Shelby, give him a wave. And also Jordan is here too. Shelby and Jordan are going to be switching off approximately every 15 minutes. So if you want to pin them, you can do so and you will have ASL interpretation. On that note, I'm going to pass it to Catherine.
Hey, Tonye, it's a pleasure to accept the pass from you, but I must say, couldn't I just pass it back for you to introduce yourself? These lovely people out there, all 80 of them, are buzzing with the question, who is this?
Okay, all right. Hello, everyone. My name is Tonye Aganaba. I use the pronouns they and them. Like many of us, but not all, I am joining from the unceded ancestral stolen territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. I am a queer, non-binary, disabled, chronically ill human being. I am a parent to one beautiful human named Lillian, and my partner is getting a fresh taste of what it's like to live with a disability because he has long COVID. So our whole household is experiencing, health stuff. But what brings me joy and hope is being in rooms like this with kindred spirits, kindred fam. I see so many names that I recognize in the chat. I'm like, gonna DM you after this is done. For those of you who would like a visual description, I am a Black, beautiful human being. I'm wearing an orange headscarf designed by Morgan Asayev. And on top of that, a green toque. I'm wearing a Black sweater. If I lean up, you can see it says decolonize across the chest. And I'm wearing 2 pieces of gold, bold jewelry. Behind me, I have a wall of white with a large painting with a gold frame. And behind that, I have 2 pieces of paper covered in Black Post-its because I'm a messy person. That's my intro. I'm gonna pass it to you, Catherine.
That was an awesome intro. Now, we wouldn't want to miss that. So I'm Catherine Frazee. I am just an old white dyke, and the love of my life and my partner in life crimes and misdemeanors is sitting right beside me. So stick your hand out there. Your head, there she is. All right, and we are in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, where we live in constant awe of the beauty and the responsibilities of stewardship and peace. I am, I guess, a filibuster old timer. Those of us who've been through it once before know the routine, and I'd just like to chat with you a bit to share some of the context for today. First of all, to welcome everyone and to echo Tonye's appreciation for your contribution, Stephen. I feel as if we've already said today what must be said. You have already said what must be said, and so brilliantly and powerfully. And if we can live up to your compelling invocation to us all, it will be a great honor and a mighty force indeed. So welcome everyone, all 80 of you now, to Canada's spectacular uprising of disability resistance to the proposition, which now is entrenched in law, that disability somehow is an exception to the rule of equal dignity and equal rights. If you are a filibuster faithful, welcome back, and thank you for coming back again, knowing that this is a rough and arduous road that we are traveling together. If you are a filibuster newcomer, welcome aboard. I think all that you need to know about us, for starters, is that this is a crip space. It is a space in which our unruly bodies and minds, our pain, our rage, our trauma, our art, our humor, and our fierce pride and love for each other, all of this is part of the package, and all of it is respected and embraced. This is a space for learning, for reparations, for creativity, and for mutual care. It is a space for building solidarity across every axis of oppression. And it is a space at this time in Canadian history where we come together, as Stephen has so beautifully articulated, in defiant objection to the expansion of laws that authorize the killing of disabled people and claim it to be a reasonable and compassionate response to our suffering. We all know that it is not. We are here again, and we have chosen this time to return because that great gaslighting of MAiD expansion is underway again in the land. You've read perhaps the background to our Disability Filibuster 2022. It has to do with the establishment of a special joint committee of the Senate and the House of Commons. That committee is going to hold so-called public hearings to which they will invite only a selected few. They will permit no one to speak for more than 5 minutes. And they will make afterward weighty decisions on matters of our lives and our deaths. They're going to consider whether to expand assisted suicide to be available to young people who are younger than 18 years of age, people with disabilities. They're going to consider whether to loosen the final requirements for consent for persons with disabilities or disabling conditions to make advance directives. And they're going to consider ambitiously whether there is any cause for concern with expansions to include mental illness, the overall state of palliative care in Canada, and with what they broadly frame as the protection of people with disabilities. That's their mandate. They have 7 weeks to cover all of that and to submit their final report by June 23rd. We know about the composition of the committee. They are a majority of people who favor MAiD expansion, who see nothing wrong or claim to see nothing wrong with the practice or how it is implemented. And we're pretty sure we know what to expect. We will be told that the system and its safeguards are working well. We will be told that there are no abuses and no systemic harm. And we will be told that what they characterize as our fears, in scare quotes, during the or throughout the 2021 filibuster, that those were clearly without foundation. So because there is no room, it seems, for us at their table, no opportunity to influence their agenda or to challenge their anti-disability bias, we're here once again. Whether or not the committee will listen, and we hope that they will, we will speak out. We will speak out today and next week and the week after for the duration of their work. We'll report briefly on their proceedings, but we're not going to let their theatrical endeavor distract us, diminish us, or gaslight us. We're going to speak the truth of our experience, making sure as we do to foreground the Crips who never get invited to the table. So let's get started. Tonye, you're going to handle a few introductions from here on.
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Catherine, for giving us that brilliant, blistering overview of what is happening right now, what, pardon my language, the fuck our Canadian, quote unquote, Canadian government believes to be appropriate response to what we all know is there's so many other things that could be prioritized over an increase in access or access to MAiD. And you talked about that so perfectly. Also, another thing that you mentioned, which just got me in my feels, is how this is a space where we're actively trying to build solidarity across every aspect of oppression. And as a Black person with a disability, as a Black person living with chronic illness and mental illness, I am so enlivened by this space because I see the way that we're making connections between disability and our experience as disabled people, policing, border politics, all of these things, they are all related. I'll come back to that crappy ass government we've got. Okay, so getting into introductions, we have an incredible group of human beings who are here to share space and chat with us today. Dr. Ameil Joseph, Garth Mullins, one of my favorite human beings on earth, Alan Mankewich, who just arrived in the room. Don't think I didn't see you sneak in there. I saw you sneak in. And also, you may have heard this one piping up and telling some jokes at the beginning, Neil Belanger. And of course, myself and Catherine, and we have two incredible performers who are going to bless us with a beautiful performance, Amal Ishaque and Rabbit Richards. So if I can, and also, how could I do this? The one and only, I feel embarrassed now. There's someone in the room that I forgot to mention, of course. The one and only, the person who brought me here today. They didn't give birth to me, that's not what I mean, but they brought me to this space today, Gabrielle Peters. Everybody knows them, everybody loves them. Gabrielle is in the room. I have a little bit of a bio for everybody. The only person I don't have a bio for is Gabrielle, but they are literally famous. So I'm not really sure. So Neil Belanger. Neil is the person who runs the BC Aboriginal Disability Society Network. He has a wicked sense of humor, which we already saw today. An incredible person, skilled in policy and the workings of the political machine. We've seen him moving stealthily and he is committed to the issue of stopping the advance of medicine, law, and policing in their dangerous ways, particularly with respect to Indigenous people. You can learn more about Neil and the work that he does by checking out the BC Aboriginal Disability Society Network. Next up, Garth Mullins. Garth is all over town, but one of the places where you would know him from is Crackdown Podcast, one of my favorites. Garth is a journalist and radio documentary producer who focuses on the decriminalization of drugs, issues of race, class, environment, capitalism, colonialism, and oppression. Please, please, please check out that podcast if you haven't yet. Dr. Ameil Joseph works with contributions from perspectives of critical mental health, post-colonial theory, critical race theory, and critical disability studies to study the production of ideas about difference, normalcy, sexuality, eugenics, race, ability, and mental illness. Finally, Alan Mankewich has a wide range of experience developing policy and programs in the public and nonprofit sectors, and has served on several advisory committees and boards of directors. A career highlight was participating in the United States government's International Visitor Leadership Program on Disability Advocacy in 2015, where he learned how advocates, disability organizations, and different levels of government work together so disabled people in the United States can exercise their civil rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Alan is also a graduate of the University of Winnipeg and Red River College. Another Winnipegger? Nice to see you, Alan. I see you waving there. Thank you so much. Gabrielle, I don't have a bio for you, and I don't want to introduce you. So I'm wondering if you want to pop in and say hello. With the space. No problem. Oh. Okay. So now that I have introduced who is going to be on this panel, I just want to take a quick moment to make sure that folks have access to the ASL interpreters. Jordan is up right now. A reminder to our panelists, please, if you can, let's remember not to avoid as much jargon as possible. And if you are going to use it, let's explain it and try to speak in plain language. And this is a note for myself, but also a note for everyone. Let's try to speak slowly enough so that the ASL interpreters can catch what we're saying, and also the live captioners. PS, live captioner, you're a saint. I've tried to do that before and it's very hard. And also a reminder to everybody who is joining us today, please, 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 please feel free to take breaks, take a rest if you need to stretch, if you need water, if you just need to turn the screen and camera off or close your computer, do whatever you need to do. This is a crypt space and we hold space for each other in what we need to do to feel safe. Okay. At this time, I would like to read a statement from Gabrielle Peters. Just 1 second here, I have to open up your screen. Gabrielle's statement is called "The Poor Crip Died That Was Never Alive. It's a Wash." You don't know when we die. The only people who notice are the ones who have to zip up the bag, transport it, open it up, and put us in a pile. I don't know what happened to my friends. The one who called the fire department to rescue me when he heard my screams. My best bud. He and his boyfriend liked to drink, but when he heard ghosts of men and alcohol haunted me, he would abstain before visiting me. I never asked him to. He also watched out the window of our social housing building as an ambulance took me to hospital during an asthma attack. And after that, he began smoking outside. He would shower and put on fresh clothes before coming into my apartment. I never asked him to. He saw my face when I came home from being told my wheelchair using self was unwanted at a place I wanted to be. An hour later, he called to say he was going to knock at my door. He called first before he noticed unexpected knocks startled me in a certain way. I never asked him to. He brought me homemade waffles and warmed syrup. He became my cooking pal when I invited him over for a holiday dinner. I saw the ones they were offering residents, the usual pile of flavorless beige they gift those of us who must not ask for more. I asked people from my past whose thread of connection to my current life as a poor crip hung on via Christmas gifts to buy me ingredients instead, the good ones. In future years, these events turned into potlucks. Each poor neighbor would buy one precious piece of produce from Whole Foods or a piece of cheese from a shop we would normally never venture into. He was so excited, he said. I asked him if he would like to carve the turkey. He just seemed like the kind of person who would. His boyfriend said he prepped by watching YouTube videos of how to carve a turkey. For years after, he would spontaneously offer, "That was the best gravy I have ever had in my life." He started cooking after that. He would make extras and bring me some. I made him what turned out to be his last meal and brought it to him in his bed. I doubted he could eat much, but I asked and he said, "Yes, please." I kept my apartment door and his open while I cooked the soup and baked the biscuits so he could feast on the aroma. We said goodbye. That doesn't usually happen here. Or the one who gave me his phone number the day I moved in, a quiet man full of style and a sweet cat. He had a relative who promised to take the cat, but when he died, she told us she planned to put it down. So my neighbor, in her 350 square feet with her adult daughter and 2 dogs, took in the cat. She later took the 2 dogs when the woman at the end of the hall died, and the plan was to put those down too. I loved all the animals, but one dog and I had a special friendship. He had an impish spirit, so I would buy stuffies and hide them around the apartment to find and claim when he visited. I would pretend to be shocked and a little upset, but then relent. He never wanted the one I tried to give him, but he loved the ones he stole. I respected that spirit. Or the lady who shuffled down the hallway in a house dress and slip-on pink slippers with a satin-like line across the toes, and who always shared the most gentle and genuine smile with me. Few words because none of us spoke her language, but we communicated. She was the sunshine that beamed forth in our institutional-looking hallways. Or the man who fell from his waist-height narrow window 12 floors up, moments after the police opened his door. He had been throwing things out his window. Throwing things out a window is a crime. Throwing things out windows gets the public very upset. Or the one who I met the day I moved in. The movers and I took a break so he could use the elevator to leave in a bag. A week after his heart stopped beating on his command. The neighbors whose hearts were still beating, though slowed, unsteady, and weakened by hunger and the violence of poverty and ableism, told me he was angry, swallowed. Some had someone somewhere who may have taken the time to point their remains in a direction, but for those who did not, are they buried in a spot no one can locate? Or are they cadaver AQS 933455723-353-FU? Let me Google. Oh, this is interesting. I read an article and it laid out a sad but respectful picture of the government decision-making process. It was written based on some Ontario legislation. Then I read BC's Anatomy Act, and it's nothing like what the article said. Basically, the body becomes the property of the government to do with pretty much as it wishes, just like when we were alive. One option is to give us a way for the children of wealthy parents to learn how to be doctors or chiropractors and abuse us to death. Cue Elton John Disney song. You don't know when we die, and you don't notice when we are alive and trying to survive. So how do we stop you from killing us? Thank you so much, Gabrielle, for sharing your words with us. And thank you so much for allowing me to read them. I would like to pass it to Catherine.
Okay, yeah, thank you. How do we make you stop killing us? That's sort of a good question, perhaps even to begin with, not just to end Gabrielle's piece with. So maybe it's time, Tonye, to open things up to our guests and hear what they have to say. What is provoked for you by Stephen's opening and by Gabrielle's very haunting reminder of the ways in which people are forced to live and die? Or are there other questions that you want to add to the mix? This is an open time. So who would like to go first? Let's be democratic about this.
I'm going to nominate Neil to go first.
Sure. So much for democracy.
No democracy here.
I'm the new person on the block. Thanks, Tanya. Thanks, Catherine, and thanks, Gabrielle, for that. Everyone, my name's Neil Belanger, and the executive director of PCANS, as was noted. I'm also a member of the Laxale clan and the House of Niganane of the Gitxsan First Nation, and I'm calling in today from the traditional territories of the Esquimalt and Songhees people, and I'm very pleased to be able to be here and work on their territories, and very pleased to have all of you here today. And I was looking through the list, and there's a lot of very strong people and a lot of strong advocates here, from ministers to lawyers or former ministers, and all allies and people who have done great work and continue to do good work. And I wish I had something profound to say, and to say, and my friend Alan there as well, he owes me money. I wish I had something to say that would encapsulate C7 and the devastating effect it has on the disability community and persons with disabilities. We're at a loss. We've been working on this for a number of years. We've testified in front of the Senate and Parliament. We've brought the voices forward from Indigenous peoples, Indigenous doctors, communities, persons living with disabilities, and it's all been silenced. We are told about surveys that bring in 300,000 responses of good things, and why MAiD is important for the general population, and the disability voice is ignored. We looked at surveys from organizations that are pro-MAiD, and they excluded all the territories. They never contacted one First Nation community, never asked them for any advice or any direction, but yet they purport that 90% of Canadians believe this is the way to go. There's something wrong with this, and when we saw passing of C7, and I think one of the things that really took me back, the whole process has, but when members of government started clapping, and they had smiles on their face, and you have to look back and say, what are we doing here? What are we doing? And it's frustrating, and I know it's frustrating for everyone on the call here, and to take a look and have the government pass laws that devalues persons living with disability, and somehow masquerade it as a positive thing, in opening up more freedoms for you. Have that choice when you don't have the support to live a good life, like Stephen said, when you don't have the support, when we live in a country where barriers are everywhere. Persons with disabilities live in systemic poverty. They're discriminated against. For Indigenous peoples within healthcare, anti-Indigenous racism is rampant. We've seen the reports. And yet, the only solution that is viable that comes up is we'll fast track death. We will make it easier for persons with disabilities because their lives can't be good. They can't really contribute, and what would not be better than that? And I tell you what, I look across the room here and I look at my colleagues here, and I tell you, I learn more from them than I've ever learned from anyone else outside the disability community. I look at Stephen there, 16 years in a residential school, living with a disability, the trauma and the tragic events that he's had to endure. And that is a man who has more integrity than most people I know. And when I talk to him, I learn. And his heart is full of love, and his heart is full of wanting to move forward. And he wants to listen. And his voice is a voice of importance. Same with Catherine, same with Alan, Gabrielle, Kerry Jaffe is on the call here today. These are all strong people that have important voices and good things to say, and they need to be heard. And I wish I was more polished on this and I had some good speech. I could throw out some statistics and talk about this and this type of thing and the financial implications of MAiD, how it's beneficial to the government and blah, blah, blah. I don't, because this is about people and this is about people's lives. And we recently, I'm sure all aware of Fiona, who was 51, who took her own life through MAiD because of her disability and her inability to take it anymore. And she reached out for help for years and got little support from the government. And when organizations like Inclusion Canada and others, and we tried to assist as well, it was too late. The system had broken her, where medical assistance and dying all of a sudden seemed to be the only viable solution. And it's not. The solution is providing people with the support that they need to thrive in Canada. This is Canada. Everybody should have the opportunity to thrive, and everybody should have an opportunity to be included and have their needs addressed. Everyone has needs, and we should all have opportunities to live. So that's all I'll say for now, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Neil. And just staying aware that my good friend and new friend, Alan, has to leave. So I'm going to pass it to Alan next, and please go ahead.
Thank you, and I do apologize in advance. I can only stick around for a few more minutes, but it's great to be among all of you today and talking about a very heavy but important issue. And it's only through the solidarity of each other that we're able to try to make some progress on it. I guess for me, I've been speaking out publicly about this issue since about 2015. Been interviewed in the media numerous times, and for me, it's always like the societal attitudes that people have towards disability that they think it's better to be dead than disabled. Recently, in the Winnipeg Free Press, there was a 1,600-word feature story about a woman who chose MAiD. She has ALS, and not to take away from any of the difficulties of living with ALS, but some of the reasons she gave for choosing MAiD is that she didn't want to one day rely on a feeding tube or depend on others for routine tasks or get assistance feeding herself or to rely on text-to-speech software. And those are things that, many of our disabled friends live with to, live a meaningful life. So, it's hard for people who, especially for someone who hasn't even gotten to that point where they actually need that, just, supposing that they would rather die than live with those things. For me, those are the kind of things that are hard to hear. And because we've seen many examples of people who live rich and meaningful lives with those supports. So guess that's what I wanted to say for now.
Thank you so much, Alan, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for joining us. It's so lovely to have you here. Dr. Ameil Joseph is up next. Go ahead.
Hi, all. Thanks for having me. You know, there's a lot to say, and then there's not much to say. I feel like there have been op-eds and Senate testimony and TV and radio interviews and advocacy and lobbying that should have clarified the clear opposition to this expansion of MAiD. And what I've been told often is that talking about the historical context of discrimination against people with disabilities, disabled folks, talking about things like euthanasia and eugenics and colonialism in Canada is something that's too taboo to speak about during some of these conversations and some of the proceedings that did occur in the past. We were told quite bluntly that, you know, legal and medical and government officials would rather this be spoken about, MAiD, be spoken about as a matter of some sort of contemporary issue of law or bioethics. But the fact that we're talking about it at all has to do with the historical context of threat and mistreatment and maltreatment and targeting. The very reason for the foreseeable death clause was specifically to protect people from the histories of complicities with ableism and racism, systems of neglect, even the systems of eradication and harm, intentional death. So, you know, I get confused when we start to wash over those historical and contemporary contexts when we know that there's a reason for thinking about the social and the historical and the political. I feel like when we started talking about removing the foreseeable death clause, we are allowing for the idea of suffering for people with an illness or disability or condition to be loosely interpreted, and thereby creating or perpetuating other forms of discrimination. You know, previously I was talking about the historical context that acknowledges that we already know that this is a historical fact. We also already know from their first annual report on MAiD that the assessment process did nothing to assess or account for the ways that our entire system creates suffering for people with chronic disease or illness or disability in terms of, you know, how they access care, or in terms of outcomes, in terms of access to income support, the adequacy or inadequacy of income support, supportive housing, the adequacy of services at home, the quality of life that is allowed for people via the ways we provide care and services or don't. You know, and those are omissions, and they're not accidents. And they're very coherent with the historical trajectories that have allowed for ableism and eugenics to persist. They're the foundations for how they're allowed right now to attach ideas of compassion to incarceration, removal, confinement, eradication, and exclusion. So we have already this body of historical evidence that allows us to think about disabled folks as burdensome or unworthy of adequate incomes or services. And those contexts are things that could have been addressed, but instead continue to be omitted. So, like, they know all of this. It's been said publicly on record that without addressing or assessing the social context of one's suffering, something that could be assessed, and without addressing things that have been institutionalized, systemic racism and ableism, we actually embed the policy of targeting those who experience ableism and racism via this law and the expansion of it. So if the idea of suffering for people with a chronic condition or an illness or disability can't in any way be differentiated from the suffering they experience as a result of being mistreated or excluded or inadequately supported by a system that has historically impacted and presently impacts the quality of life for disabled folks, for racialized folks, they know that this will result in deaths that disproportionately impact those groups. And that should have been more than enough to say no to this. It is a sad, disturbing reality. And the idea that there's any kind of compassion at the base of that falls apart on that premise. Because if you're really thinking about compassion, then you're thinking about the quality of life and investing in people and in their support and in their care, such that the question of adequate housing or income or support is not there because you've addressed it up front. And that's not what they're doing here. That's not what they're asking questions about. It's been frustrating, but I see hope in work like this, in the filibuster and all the folks that gather to resist the gaslighting that goes on, to resist those emissions. I'll stop there. I've been talking for a while.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph. Ameil, saying it correctly. I really, really appreciate a lot of the points that you made, especially around the fact that the government can't get away from the fact that they are seriously being genocidal with this kind of activity, right? Like they have made a marked decision not to address all of the other parts that could actually improve a person's material experience and have just gone straight to the death part, which is part and parcel with Canada's legacy, because we know what's up here. These people are killers. Thank you so much, Ameil. I know that you got to jump off pretty soon. I want to pass it back to my friend Catherine. Do you have any illuminations that you would like to share?
Well, let me start by saying we had a request. It seems to have settled down now, but there was a bit of background noise. So anyone who doesn't need to have the microphone on, if you could mute your mic, just because we are picking up some thumping sounds in the background. Ameil, that was really a thorough exploration of the context for this law, the deep roots that are, well below the surface, and that we are forbidden to speak of. And that censoring is very vigorous, and I'm sure you have encountered it, as have I, whenever we challenge the suggestion that MAiD and the MAiD discussions are completely ahistorical, right? This is just the emergence of a new and marvelous medical technology that we can offer to address suffering. And, without that discussion of its historical antecedents and the ways in which the sacrificing or elimination of certain lives becomes normalized, without that discussion, people don't get it. They so don't get what our problem is. And you're quite right in your expression of the problem with offering death as a solution to suffering. And likewise, I would say disingenuous response to our claim of autonomy. Yes, we want autonomy, but in the choices that we make in life and in living, autonomy is our means to better life, to fulfilling life, and to anyway, I don't need to repeat what you have said so thoroughly, Amal. I think I'm really very interested to hear what Garth has to say in this thread. So, Garth, if you are there, come on out.
Right here. Hey, thanks very much. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for inviting me to this. I guess I'm a OG filibustee. I was here last year when we did this. I don't know whether that makes me OG or not, but
Yep,
I'm going to claim it.
it does.
Thanks. Let me describe myself here. I'm a middle-aged white guy. And if that doesn't make you press mute, thank you for sticking with me. I'm also blind, although I have a little eyesight. So enough to stay in frame, but not really enough to make out what y'all look like. And I'm in a darkened room that has a lot of junk in it. And in the foreground, you see the fine RE20 microphone, which gives you this beautiful baritone voice that you're hearing right now. I guess my reason for being here is, I was invited by Gabrielle and Tonye and was part of it last year, but I really seen the power of connecting struggles. And I really reflect on the last line of Gabrielle's essay there. How do we stop you from killing us? And I think about that a lot because I'm part of a drug user activist movement. I've been a drug user, on heroin and methadone my whole life. And I've seen half of the people that I've come up with die from what is essentially like a century-long policy of prohibition. Making substances illegal so that they get produced with no regulation, having the police chase them and bust those substances so they get stronger and stronger and stronger. It's like a well-documented process. And last week, there was another coroner's report, as there is almost every month, telling us how many hundred people died in the previous month. And that's been going on for a lot of years now in British Columbia. And, as I'm realizing how connected our struggles are, I'm realizing how these policies are targeting and killing so many of us. And I think a lot of us were having this realization. We were having a conversation quite recently saying, we've got to connect our struggles because these are all incidents of necropolitics, of people in Victoria or Ottawa deciding who's going to live and who's going to die, whether it's Bill C-7, whether it's the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, hell, whether it's the Indian Act going all the way back to before Confederation, whether it's the processes that lead to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, or police murders of Black and Indigenous communities, or just like the constant carbon fixation, carbon fundamentalism of our society that's causing a heat dome in Vancouver and atmospheric rivers, which killed hundreds last year. And we barely hear about that. And so there's all these different policy ways in which we're targeted, but we're all separated into little silos until we find each other in places like this and decide, fuck no, we're not going to quietly just die and conveniently just shuffle off the earth while policymakers go on to their next press conference or whatever. This conversation that a bunch of us were having was like, it's time for us to start standing up for each other in these moments of death. So, drug users standing up against Bill C-7, all of us standing up when people die in climate change emergencies, disability community standing up when the coroner statistics come up for more dead drug users. There's all these ways that we're dying and being killed, and we can't die alone anymore. This is what happens to me and my friends is we die alone in small rooms because of the law and the stigma around drug use. And it's what happens to the people in Gabrielle's building that she was just telling us about. And it's what happened to people in the heat dome. And it's what happens to a lot of people who can't find any other way, any other like economic or healthcare way for Bill C7. And so we have to stop being in these rooms by ourselves. We have to stop dying alone. And we have to come together and say, stop fucking killing us. And we thought, oh shit, what should we call this new group? And we thought a bunch of different names. And really, I think the group is just called Stop Fucking Killing Us, or Stop Killing Us if you don't like swearing. But that's just an idea that's been percolating around over, I'd say, the last year or so. Just as we've seen that this necropolitics, this just allowing for or deciding that big groups of people are going to die is expanding. And they're really taking it mainstream. You know, the government has found, hell, you can kill these marginalized groups of people, no problem. Let's try it on everybody. So now, you know, the pandemic response or lack of response, which was like, oh, we tried a little bit, but we're all tired now and we want to go back to movie theaters or whatever. You know, this is the voice of the public health officials and just giving up. You know, so they're just saying, and maybe this has always been the case in capitalism, that we are actually fine for large numbers of people to die because of our policies. In fact, it's an essential ingredient of the economy. A certain amount of social murder is just the price of, the free market. So I thought what I had to say today was just wanted to sort of trot our little nation idea for a group out into the light, like a little pony, and take it around the circle and see what people think and if people like it or if people have names or, ideas. And I'm hoping as the weeks and months go on that we're able to find ways to show solidarity for each other and just start to point back at the government and say, look, you can't just stand beside the deaths of all these different groups as if it's some force of nature or an accidental unintended consequence or wringing your hands or thinking about maybe having an inquiry down the road or something. We know who's doing it. It's you. We know it's part of the policy and we're sick of it. So thanks for having me on the podcast or on the panel today.
Thank you.
I love you.
Tonye?
Same back at you.
I just love you so much. Stephen, go ahead.
Tonye, if I may, I want to thank everybody for shedding light on their lived experience. I also want to thank everybody for their voice. Voice is the key to this. We've got to find a way to eliminate annihilation of any people, of any circumstance. We've got, when you look at it from an Indigenous perspective and what we've been through, as well as all the other minorities throughout Canada and throughout the world, we've got to eliminate the thought or bring to the attention of Canada annihilating a group of people, a certain group of people, because they don't know how to handle it or how to address it. It's no longer asking, what must we do? We have to demand and state, what do we want? It's not, how can I help you? It's like reconciliation. It brings back to mind reconciliation and what we've been through. We can no longer ask what we do. We demand what we require. And I also want to say that I would love to see the deaf community voice their concern today. Is there a representative, Tonye, that we can hear from the deaf community and have them address how they feel about this situation of C7? And I would also like to address this issue. There are many disability organizations that are not represented here today. We are the voice today, but without our voice and without their knowledge of our voice, how can we come together as a united front so that we can address the issues when an opportunity arises? And if we're funded by the government or agencies, by voicing our opinions or our concerns, will that affect our bottom line? That's my concern. But it's no longer about that. It's about addressing an issue of annihilation of a people, annihilation of a segment of people in a certain section of society. It's ethnic cleansing, really, it is. And I think if we are serious about coming together and addressing this issue, then let's do it, because we have no other option. And if we want to address this and bring it to the attention within those communities that aren't hearing about this or knowing about this, we need to get it out there. So Tonye, is there a representative from the deaf community that we could hear from?
I don't think that there's a representative from the deaf community in here right now as part of the panelists, but I want to flag that this is the first of many gatherings that's going to happen. So there will be more opportunities to continue bringing together more and more people, as you're mentioning, Stephen. Catherine, perhaps you want to add?
I just want to say, Gabrielle and I have been talking about this, and Stephen, we will make sure that you hear and are invited to have a direct conversation with members of Canada's deaf community to engage with them about this important issue. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure, as Tonye says, I'm not sure if we have any in our audience today. None have been identified to my knowledge, but we will make sure that happens in a more focused and deliberate way. Thank you for raising it.
May I ask one more question? Is how many filibusters have we had, and where have they gotten to, and have we addressed those, or are they thrown by the wayside and forgotten? And how are we going to ensure that this C7 is thrown by the wayside? It must.
It must, and we aren't giving up, and we aren't going away, and we aren't going to only get better and more consistent at showing up for each other, as Garth urged us to do. We have had, in answer to your question, in 2021, we went for almost 60 hours, almost non-stop. We went round the clock with broadcasts, and all of that is archived. It's now cataloged on our website, our bilingual website, and it's never going to be brushed away. The authorities in Parliament didn't pay much attention, but that just means we have to roar more loudly this time. And sooner or later, they're going to have to contend with us.
One of the other things that I might want to add is this brings back for me and many of our residential school survivors who have survived, but are not only surviving but thriving. But it brings also back the fear of those that are still traumatized by their lived experience, traumatized once again by COVID, traumatized once again by this, and not only traumatized, but they continue to be triggered. So we have more than one issue that we're continuously dealing with and trying to address on a daily basis. We deal with one thing, it's not complete, and then before you address the issue. Another thing you're constantly having to look at, so it's like the government using a system of distraction. If it's one issue, one issue of COVID-19. COVID-19 has really done an impact, has an effect and an impact on our community and our First Nations. A lot of them are traumatized by their lived experience, as I've stated earlier, and they continue to be traumatized because they haven't even, a lot of them are triggered and traumatized over and over again. And I think we have to find a way of addressing those issues as well.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for bringing up all of those points. And, you know, it is absolutely crucial that we get to that root cause and deal with, you know, that trauma that people have that is unresolved. And, you know, expanding MAiD, C7, that is not getting to the root cause of it, of like helping people deal with what they've got going on. But one thing that I know is really helpful to me and to many folks is art and creativity and connection to culture, community. And when we were having conversations about putting this this gathering together, one of the things that we talked about is how do we infuse hope? How do we infuse creativity? How do we bring levity? How do we bring poignant moments of thought through creativity? And obviously I looked around my community and I was like, who's my favorite creators? So it's at this point that I would like to introduce an incredible soul who's going to transition us into the next piece of our conversation by sharing with us some of their incredible poetry. This is my relative, my bae, Amal Ishaque. Amal is a gender fluid, chronically ill queer poet and educator with Muslim, Jewish ancestral roots. Their community organizing is informed by their and their families' experiences at the intersection of the war on drugs, the war on terror, medical racism, and white supremacy. Amongst other things, they are a co-founder of one of my favorite initiatives in the whole town of so-called Vancouver. It's called the Marpole Mutual Aid, which organizes a community pantry and campaigns for much needed support for disabled, poor, and racialized neighbors in historically under-resourced areas of Marpole. My family member, Amal, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Tonye, and everybody for having me here today. And wow, I wish I could get those kinds of introductions all the time. Amazing. And I'm just really feel both privileged and honored to be here today and learning from everyone. And I know that there has been so much work done and so many spaces like this held last year, as people were mentioning, in this year. So thank you. Before I say more, I wanted to start, of course, with a description of myself for folks, and also first and foremost acknowledging that I am speaking from unceded Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories, unceded territories, and describing myself, brown-skinned, fat, femme with glasses, long black, mostly gray, somewhat blue hair. In the background behind me, there's a turquoise-ish wall with an evil eye charm, a mirror, and a screen with flowers and birds on it. So I hope that's helpful. So again, thanks for having me. So when Tonye got in touch, you know, they mentioned the idea of bringing in some poetry that's joyful and resilient and all those good things and shaking things up. So I kind of searched through my poetry to find something that I thought might work for today. So this is actually, you know, inspired by the work of Saul Williams, who I am such a big fan of. If you haven't read his work or like watched his films, please do. He's incredible. And also I wanted to wish those who are celebrating and marking the occasion, as I am, Ramadan Mubarak, Ramadan Kareem.
Ramadan Mubarak,
thank you. And also Pesach Alegre. So happy Passover to those also marking this occasion. It's a very special time. So many different communities coming together during these days. So Without further ado, I'm going to begin. And if at any point you can't hear me, just let me know. I'm going to just pull up my text here. So this is called 99.9% dark matter, a conjuring to call in the beauty of our darkness. And it starts with a Saul Williams quote. The role of darkness is not to be seen as or equated with ignorance, but with the unknown and the mysteries of the unseen. Astronomers have found a ghost galaxy that is 99.9% dark matter. Whereas darkness is simply the absence of light. Whereas the heart of our darkness is not evil, terrifying, stained, sinful, barbaric emptiness, but the beauty of infinite cosmos, the lush velvet backdrop for millions of stars, the place where new life, new ways of survival may be found, the shade from 1,000 raging suns, the possibility of futures we have yet to know, and planets that will never be destroyed by corporate vampires sucking oil from the earth and using water only for profit or torture. We have been called to the future. We have been called to the darkness. We have been called. Do past encounters make us strong enough to carry on? It is true the trauma of empire is carried in our bones, passed down from ancestor to child. Equally true, our DNA carries a double helix of resistance and resilience, of memory, of a time before the white gin of genocide spread like a mist. Genetic memory travels along synapses. The blueprint for the future can be found in our past. We have been called to the future. We have been called to the darkness. We have been called. Listen closely with senses you have yet to recognize. You can hear the wail of the azan echo through space. What scientists never tell us, hope travels through space at the speed of darkness. Darkness travels through our blood at the speed of freedom. Freedom travels through our hearts at the speed of revolution. Azadi ke musafir hain hum. We are freedom travelers. The galaxies are ummah. Distant moons bend knees in sajda. These are the days we orbit around each other instead of whiteness. The future is calling. The future looks like us. Our melanin-infused bodies have shed the imprint of missionaries, white supremacy, and colonialism. Historical footnotes for the children of the future. Distant memories light years away. It is not that we have forgotten the great uprisings. We just no longer need to engage. We manifest our own destiny. We have been called to the future. We have been called to the darkness. We have been called. Unseen by them is the beauty in our darkness. Wanderer, musafir, wander in, wander out of the unknown. But understand this, the absence of light holds mysteries and knowledge, rest and orbits, possibilities we dare not explore in the whiteness of dawn. Understand, musafir, it is our skin's proximity to the night skies of distant galaxies that threatens them. Our dark hearts rise up in multiple shades of gold dusk and red soil, desert dunes and limitless horizons, amethyst and labradorite, obsidian and anthracite, carnelian and argillite. Stars go nova at the very sight of our beauty. What further testament from the heavens do we need? Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so
Wow.
much.
Wow, thank you, Amal. Your words are just so exquisite and so luscious and so strong. And indeed, the wonder and the mysteries of the unseen in our world. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And indeed, we have been called. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Amal. As I mentioned just before we started this portion, Catherine and I, and also Gabrielle, when we were coming together to have this conversation and start planning this gathering, we were talking about the ways that art and creativity are powerful gathering points, moments of levity, moments of reflection in all of our struggles and all of our movements. So I'm super grateful that we were able to have you share your poetry with us, Amal. And don't even think that's all we got for you, people in the audience. There's more to come. I just want to say thank you to the folks who have been making good use of the Q&A. We are going to try and get to all of your questions before we leave at 3 today. But if we don't get to your questions, do not stress and do not worry. There will be a secondary disability filibuster and many more after that. But the next one is coming up on Sunday, this Sunday. I don't know the exact date because I don't remember how calendars work, but Sunday.
I can tell you, it's an auspicious day.
Oh, what day is it?
MAiD Day. MAiD Day.
It's May 1st?
Yep.
Perfect. So Sunday, May 1st from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern. That's 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. PST. The panelists so far are going to be Dr. John Neary, Kaylee, Rabbit Richards, Serena Baines, Dr. Jennifer Baumbush, Lucia. Oh, okay.
I was wrong.
Never mind. Sorry, giving you the wrong information.
It's the 24th. Well, we'll pretend it's MAiD Day.
Okay, so it's April 24th is the correct date. The panelists are correct though, right? Yes. Lucia Lorenzi, yes. Trudeau Lemons, and the hosts with the mosts will be beloved Catherine and one of our favorites who's in the audience, Q. So be sure if you can make it to come to that one. This panel will go further and the conversation will be focused around medical ableism. So there will be opportunities to have more of these conversations coming up in the future. Moving forward, the next portion is we would like to talk a little bit about hope and what is bringing us hope, giving us hope, and keeping us moving forward. And I just want to flag, there was a question in the chat, which I think I want to bring forward as the kind of linchpin for this next little bit. And this question is coming from Jane Shi, and it says, there's something about care in an ableist society that can turn violent really quickly towards disabled people. Both the Mental Health Act and guardianship laws in Canada make it more difficult for a lot of us to have autonomy. Just the idea of navigating trusting relationships of care can feel impossible when institutions are tasked with such care, when both laws and attitudes enshrine this violence as acceptable. Here's the question. How do we imagine care, interdependency as interdependency as freedom and love that imagines lives and futures when we can't even trust organizations tasked to care for us? There's so much to learn, and I'm hopeful that having more of these conversations can facilitate that. Thank you so much, Jane. So the question there is, how do we imagine care, interdependency, and freedom? And also, when I saw this question, I was like, oh, this for me ties to the things that bring me hope, which is community, which is organizing, which is hanging out with homies like Garth and with Catherine and Gabrielle. But that's the question that I want to pass to our esteemed panelists. What is bringing you hope? How do we move forward? And what's coming next? So anybody who would like to answer, I know Ameil, you got a split. So maybe if you want to start this one up. Anybody else?
I can say a few words.
Go ahead, Neil. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I think we just have to have hope. I mean, that's just how it is. If we don't have hope, why are we here? We know that change can happen, and we know that the mistakes of the government, if we bring them to attention, if we can come together, not unlike Garth had said, as different communities, and speak in a stronger voice, then we can see positive change. And in theory, in Canada today, there are some things led by the government that should produce some good change in theory, which is kind of interesting that when we talk about the Disability Inclusion Action Plan and the Accessible Canada Act and different legislation that's coming through and revamping healthcare systems, addressing anti-Indigenous racism, all those things that are again in theory positive steps might have some impact on our community, but logically, you think that those things would be in place first before you start expanding C7 and anything like that. Give people the opportunity to thrive. So although I have hope, I question, the order of logic and things, right? Like, why would you be rushing through, as Catherine said in the beginning, for those that may not have heard it, 7 weeks to review this. And from what I've heard, Catherine, they're dedicating 1 day of the week there. So that's 7 days. 7 days to look at issues, for expanding mental health as a sole condition and mature minors and this type of thing. I have hope because I work with great people, and I know great people that know great things and that are leaders, and many of them are on the call, and we're on the call today. But then, that hope is somewhat diminished as well when we Catherine, and she's telling us about the format to how this will go, and you think, well, how can you 7 weeks? I mean, that's not feasible. That's not feasible. And Gabrielle, and a writer in her work and the blog that you read, it's exactly right. It's like who is going to remember? Who is going to make sure that the persons with disabilities are noted and that they're put up and shown for who they are, and it's just, so I know I'm babbling, but it's hope and it's trepidation at the same time. But we have to be positive. If we don't, then we just quit, and then we know that there's nowhere to go. So that's my nonsensical rambling answer for right now.
Thank you, Neil. I support you because I was starting to babble.
We're brothers.
Thank you for cutting me off.
Babbling brothers. I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I just want to throw it back to my brother Garth to babble for a second, if you're there.
Yeah, I'm here. I don't really have much to add. I mean, I can just say that we, in the activist circles that I'm in, we think about what community models of care and safety would be a lot. And we try to practice some of those where we can escape the medical models. Like, we felt the imprisonment and racism and abuse in the sort of medical prison that they build so much that we've tried to build things outside of it if at all possible. And it's hard to scale. It's hard to rebuild what the state has all the resources to provide or misprovide. But yeah, I mean, for a lot of years, we've organized our own safe injection sites. We organized our own needle distribution when the state wouldn't allow us to do that. And we've organized our own safe supply distribution. When drugs are killing us, we find and source clean versions of coke, meth, and heroin and give them out to members of the community. And I think sometimes we just have to do that for each other. Certainly we know that it doesn't scale to reach everybody, but it it does sort of poke the state right in the eye and say, you know, you ought to be doing this properly, not the fucked up way you're doing it or not doing it now. And so that civil disobedience, sometimes, you know, it has this way of reminding us of our power as communities, reminding us our responsibility to each other, reminding the state that we have power, and changing history. So, you know, there's a lot going on there, but sometimes we have to build it ourselves. And that applies to community safety too. You know, like, for a lot of people, you just can't call the cops, right? I can't call the cops. The guy down the fucking hallways beating the shit out of his old lady. I mean, I got to go down there my own self. We can't call the cops because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if they're going to arrest me or shoot her or what the hell happens, right? And that's like half the goddamn city can't call the cops. So we all learn how to de-escalate. We all learn how to, like, when shit's jumping off, to bring the temperature down, be like, hey man, let's just go have a cigarette and talk about it. Sometimes that's all it takes, right? Whereas the police roll up, they always raise it, you know, and they always say, oh, it's because of mental health, like, and the police turn themselves into the frontline responders for mental health. And every moment you see police creep into these new areas of health. So when we feel like health is a prison and we're over policed in health, sometimes we're really policed in health. You know, like those security guys who work at St. Paul's aren't fucking around sometimes. So we have to take a lot of this back and kind of do it and own it ourselves and find our own way. And you know, some of the really revolutionary periods in history are when people build community and social power and infrastructure that's so effective that it actually leaves the state off to the side looking pathetic. And they're all there with their thumb up their butt going, what are we even for now? Because the community's doing it for ourselves. And that's revolutionary. That period of dual power, that's when real big things happen. So, I mean, that's kind of what I look to, you know, and I see these little sparks, these little moments of it. In all of this, don't fucking kill us. I do see these little sparks. And maybe that's the hope, Tonye, that you were hoping that we would get to at some point.
Yes, that's the exact hope I was looking for. You named exactly what I don't know if you could see me over here, but I was losing my nonsense because everything that you said echoes exactly how I feel. As much as we need to lobby this genocidal government for change, it's actually moments like this coming together, creating the networks of resistance that actually serve the needs of our communities. The drug user community is doing it. Folks organizing against the police are doing it. Mutual aid groups are doing it. Shout out Marpol. Like, we're all, you know, together taking care of ourselves. I want to read an answer to Jane's question, which was just shared with me in the chat by Gabrielle. Jane, focus on my face and my voice. Imagine Gabrielle speaking to you. Disabled people are often harmed when seeking care. Care is a place of trauma for many of us. Now, when we seek care, we may be offered death. So one thing I struggle with is the use of the word care. It's not helpful that we use, English is a clumsy language. And it's not helpful that we use the word we use for love and intimacy and genuine care is the same as the one we used for institutions and for those paid to care for us. And why and who too often decide they know better than us. My words, this is Gabrielle's words, which were meant as a meditation of life and death of poor Crips, were also about how we care for one another. In the midst of the margins, we model love. We must remove capitalism from care. So we need to remind the caregivers that they are not, in fact, givers of care because they don't know how to care. Thank you so much, Gabrielle, for sharing that. And Jane, I hope that that is an answer that is as poignant to you as it was to me, but that reminder there, in the midst of the margins, we model love. That's what I'm taking away from today. I want to pass it to Stephen. I know you said you were babbling earlier, but I just want to throw it back to you because I want to hear what you're finding hopeful, I want to know what you're holding on to.
Meaningful dialogue, open discussion, serious. Because at the end of the day, whether or not you're serious, at the end of the day, with or without your help, we still have to address the issues before us. We have a responsibility as role models to ensure that the future of people with disabilities and the future of people with mental health and the future of people dealing with a wide range of disabilities are continued thoughts in our mind and are valued. And so we have a great responsibilities upon our shoulders. There's no greater way than having to get a shot in the arm and to realize what our responsibility is, regardless of who you are, where you come from, what race you are, what color you are, what ethnicity you come from. The hope is that we must do it together. It's not about race. It's about being in the race for the segment of society we represent. Doing nothing is not an option. Doing something is. And it's time, like my mother said, just before she died, on her deathbed, she said, "David, it's time to speak up." So regardless of the fear that we may face, we can't let fear overrule our responsibility. And we have an obligation to those that look up to us. Doing nothing is not an option. Doing something is a must. Failing to do that, we fail this whole mandate and purpose.
So much, Stephen. Regardless of the fear, it is time for us all to gather and to stand up together. That is something that I scribbled down on my little piece of paper here. And I thank you so much for all of the wisdom that you've shared with us today, and all of the calls to actions that you've given us, like get up and get out. It's now or never. And I'm going to be thinking about, what your mom said to you, and that's going to be rolling around in my head.
Well, Neil was always on my case today, so he made sure that I was here.
Well, first off, who's David? I thought your name was Stephen. I mean, that's what's going on here? I mean, who
David,
are you?
my mom gave me another name from her parents, from her lineage. I have a name of Stephen David George Lytton, but one of the impacts of residential school and colonization is that I see myself as, my registered name is Stephen Lytton. My government name is Stephen Lytton. My Indian name is Stephen Lytton. And that's as a result of my lived experience in colonization. So my mom's name, through her relatives, I was named David. So she said, David, in there, just moments before she passed, she said, it's time to speak up. So this is where we're at. It's time to speak up, and not only for myself, but for others. And we must speak up for others as well. We all must. Failing to do so is failing not only ourselves, but failing what we stand for.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I just want to apologize to folks who had sent questions in the chat that we weren't able to get back to. Specifically, there's a question here saying, how is the filibuster trying to get people who are currently being traumatized by or who are still triggered by topics relating to institutionalization, MAiD, etc., involved and included in this work? No one left behind and all that. I think maybe I am not the person to answer this, but the fact that this is not just one event that's happening, that we are aiming to do a series of these and continue the conversation going, is just part of how we're trying to make sure that more and more folks can be involved in this. I want to pass it to Catherine. Maybe they can provide a little bit more insight there.
Yes, no, you've hit it precisely, Tonye, and we really appreciate the input and the reminder that that is indeed part of what we are committed to do, and we are working on it. So noted, and thank you.
Awesome. We have another question here from Ocean Onally. First of all, it's a thank you to everybody. Wanted to say thank you so much to the panelists, performers, and other organizers for creating this space. You all give me so much hope, says Ocean. Thank you for being yourselves and for this critical work. The question is, obviously, activism takes so many forms, and I'm wondering whether anyone knows of any plans for actions such as protests, taking to the streets in the context of Bill C-7. Also wanted to offer if anyone wants to connect, particularly in so-called Toronto, folks looking to organize and build resistance there should feel free to add Ocean on Twitter at cause, CAUSE, COMMOCEAN, cause come Ocean, or on Facebook, Ocean Jaya Connolly. Ocean, thank you so much for reaching out, and I hope you'll continue to stay in touch with folks here. Oh, go ahead.
One more thing, if I may, is we may want to consider doing a national thing in regards to a big movement of going to Ottawa, as the First Nations have done a number of years together to do together, was they did, if you read up on the Constitutional Express, they came from the coast to coast to coast and all met at Ottawa to address a major issue as to the livelihoods that they were living, and enough was enough. So that to maybe come together as disabled communities, come together and dreaming a big vision like that, because we can no longer wait and no longer, don't ask us how, get involved. You can no longer wait for people to do it. We have to get involved. So the individual that asked the question a few minutes ago, just get involved. We need you. You don't need us, we need you.
Heard it here first. If you were looking for an invitation, if anybody was looking for an invitation to participate in this work, in this great struggle, that was your invitation. You are needed. Also just want to flag one more thing from the questions, and I think that this is maybe related to what you just mentioned, Stephen. An anonymous attendee said, I want to share, it feels like a unionization against preventable death when Garth and other folks talk about starting a new group. Maybe, Stephen, you should come and meet with this new group and we can talk about how we're going to go to Ottawa. I think that sounds like a road trip that I would do with you all.
How many groups do we need to narrow down to stay focused on what we're here for? And that's to address the Bill C-31. How do we narrow that down and stay focused so that we don't get too big and get, so that we don't split? We need, like reconciliation. Let me use reconciliation. this fear of reconciliation is that there's so many fears and lack of understanding. The way I see this process is going, let's get together, find a focus that we all have our differences and our opinions, but let's focus on something that we can see as a number one goal first and reach that goal and work towards that. And that's building reconciliation. That's building unity. Understand why we're doing this and how come we need to do this. And how important is it to you? What does this process mean to you individually, community-wise, and on a national, provincial, and on a national basis? Do we understand what reconciliation is? Do we understand why we're doing this filibuster? And what do you see, how do you see it working? How do we see it working collectively? Because we got to come together with one collective issue to really nail this Bill C-31 and to eliminate it ASAP, and others that may come, others similar to C7 come down so that we don't have to address this issue again. Do we understand this filibuster? And why do we want to get involved? We need to get involved, but we have to have one focus, one goal in mind. We all have our differences, but we need to find that one focus and run with it.
Yeah.
Dead or alive.
Agree. And that's why the group is called Stop Fucking Killing Us. It's real simple. We drilled right down to the core of the matter, and it doesn't matter what kind of way you're using to kill people, if it's policy, if it's police, if it's border services, if it's CBSA, whatever. If you're using political power to kill people, we're coming after you. I just want to flag that we have only a few minutes left, and I think that there's a small chance we might get kicked out at 3 p.m. So I'm going to pass it to Catherine, if I might.
Okay, and yeah, thank you, Stephen. You've certainly given us lots to continue talking about in upcoming filibuster conversations, and there will be many. Before we wrap up today, we wanted, the three of us, Gabrielle, Tonye, and myself, felt that it was important to make a space among us for remembering those who have been killed, those who have been lost as a result of state neglect, of active eugenic policies, the casualties of necropolitics. And so we're just going to take a quiet moment, and everyone is invited to participate by thinking of or speaking aloud to yourself or to whomever you're with the name of someone or many whom you remember and who should, if this were a truly just world, who should be with us. So a moment for the remembrance of quick lives lost. Thank you.
so much, Catherine, for holding that space for us. And thank you to each and every one of you for coming. We realize it's 3:01, but we have one last sweet treat before you head out into the rest of your afternoon. I would like to introduce and welcome to the proverbial floor, one of my dearest, nearest, sweetest friends, Rabbit Richard, plural. Rabbit, if you want to give yourself a little intro and say your spiel, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. First, a visual description. I managed to clear all the things out of behind me, so it's just a white background, and I'm in a very brightly lit room, which is too bright for my migraine. But I only have to do this for a few minutes at a time. I'm a Black person with fluffy, twisted hair, and I am hanging out in my hooded bathrobe today because it is very important to be comfortable while discussing difficult things. By way of introduction, I was born on the territories of the Lenni Lenape in New York. I'm just waiting for our interpreter. I didn't warn anyone I was going to say that. And I'm currently in Vancouver. This poem that I'm going to read was written in Montreal about 2014. So I've moved around a bit and experienced Crip life in a couple of places. And the last thing I'll say by way of introduction is that my Zoom is occasionally troubled. So I'm going to put the text of the poem in the chat for everyone, and then I'll read it. So if I cut out, you'll have access to it. Unfortunately, formatting is not a thing in the Zoom chat, but all the words are there. Okay, this poem is called Morning. The sun on my eyelids makes me sleepy. Hot light always feels like a caress. I miss your smell. I dreamt of your pleasure, woke up giggling, eyes crinkling, skin tingling. Pad naked to the kitchen, bare feet shrink from the chill in the floor. I stand in the square of warmth where sunlight has scrubbed a window of gold in the wooden floorboards, while the kettle takes forever to boil. I miss your hands wrapped around me, the fly of your jeans against my naked flesh when you come in from work. I bring a mug back to the bedroom. Cross-legged in the middle of the soft, I let the steam make veils before my eyes. Your love made me ambitious. Without you, I sleep all day. The world was less hostile when your body fit mine. I almost believed in altruism. Your hungry fingers seeking loyalty in my muscles. My teeth ache to lodge against your shoulders. You used to ride me like a horse. I used to wear you like a blanket. Interlocking fingers slipping in our sweat and your dog staring at us, perplexed. I miss the way your eyes would darken. Intensity stole your smile, but the evil in your gaze was a moving promise, and your feet would walk the sheets right off the bed. I miss your breath in my ear. Uneven and full of worshipful disbelief, I surfed home on your body. You made port in my soul. There is no emptiness in our house, just places you took me, surfaces we blessed, rooms in which we folded bodies and dreams like origami cranes. I miss your useless kiss in the middle of my forehead. Soon, I'll wake up and your pillowcase will no longer smell like you. I don't want to think of you cold in the ground. I want to remember you here, in bed, in love, in sunlight. Thanks.
you so much, Rabbit. I have like small tears in the corners of my eyes. I'm not really a crier, but you got me a little bit. Thank you so much, Rabbit. I hear Stephen humming in appreciation and loving you too. I am so grateful to you, to Amal for blessing us, and to all of our speakers for being here with us today. Dr. Ameil Joseph, Alan Mankewich, who unfortunately had to leave earlier. We also had, oh, hang on, I'm going through my list here. Garth Mullins, obviously, Stephen Lytton, Neil Belanger, what an incredible gift. And I want to shout out my host with the most, co-host with the most, Catherine. Tell the people how you feel.
I feel once again in awe of the power of our people and in deep appreciation of the directing mind behind this gathering, Gabrielle Peters. So beautifully done, beautifully convened, and thank you all. Can't wait to join in again on Sunday the 24th. I think it's 2 p.m. Eastern, but I've been known to screw up before, so check Twitter. Keep your eye on Twitter, keep the conversation going, keep the pressure up, and keep up the hope and the fight. Remember what Amal told us, we are called. Thanks, everyone.
Tonye,
Yes.
I'd also like for you to thank our ESL agencies.
You are so correct. Thank you so much to Jordan and Shelby. They are joining us from, oh, I wrote it down and now I can't find it. Anyone want to remind me what the name of the company is?
We are from Maple Communications in
That's
BC.
the one. Thank you so much. Maple Communications in BC, but rep in Winnipeg. Both Shelby and the homie were from Winnipeg. So thank you so much for being with us. We really, really appreciate you coming here and being with us today. And thank you, Stephen, for the reminder. I appreciate it. Also, to all the folks who have been in the background doing the tech, making sure that we're all in the right place at the right time, that our faces and voices can be seen and heard. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And of course, to Gabrielle for the invitation to participate in this. I am so grateful to have met Stephen, to have met Catherine, to have met Ameil, to have met Neil, to reconnect with Garth. I am so grateful for this time together, and I'm super looking forward to Sunday. Catherine's already given out the information. Catherine, do you want to tell folks the Disability Filibuster Twitter handle? I don't have it offhand, if you remember.
All right. Gabrielle, can you type it in the text in the chat window? You're asking the old white lady about Twitter. I can tell you where the website is or the email address. You know what? There's a link to our Twitter feed on the website, disabilityfilibuster.ca.
There you go.
And yeah, there we go. Okay, everybody, find us. We're not hard to find.
Tonye, one more.
Of course.
Is there an opportunity for those that didn't get to see this or would like to hear talk about this with regard a lot of my friends that would like to be involved? How do they get involved?
Yes, they should go to our website, Stephen, and there will be an archived copy available very soon on the website. And they'll be able to find all of our other filibuster broadcasts as well. We record everything and you can get back to it.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our panelists and to all of you, our guests. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Check out disabilityfilibuster.ca for more details.